So this is the next video in the series of videos that talks about how to compose units by attaching models to units, and we've been looking at the specific role of different kinds of models. And in this video, we're going to look at weapon systems and munition models and the important role that they play. The weapon system model is intended to represent a system that can launch or shoot at other units. A munition model is used to represent the thing that gets shot. For example, and this is what we're going to do in this particular video, a weapon system would be a missile launcher, and the munition would be the missile itself. So the weapon system would launch the missile, and the missile then would fly to the target and engage the target. And so that needs to be able to be a separate model. So in order to launch a munition, we normally have to have a weapon system model. It's possible to write other kinds of models that can launch munitions, but in the real world, there's always some type of weapon system model that launches other things. So that's what we're going to have here. So we're going to employ a weapon system model on this particular unit. So we're going to do the same thing that we've done before. We're going to say employ weapon system. And then we're going to go browse, and we have a weapon system meta object already defined in this scenario. So we'll hit accept and everything's fine. I'll go back to my composition now, and you can see now I've got this weapon system model here. So there it is right there, this missile launcher. So let's go take a look at the missile launcher. And as is the case for all these things, we double click on it. This is a very, very simple weapon system model. It's, as is the case with all of the FEX models, all the tutorial models, they're as simple as we can possibly make them in order to illustrate how a model of that type works and how it interacts with the other types of models that are in Flame. So the only thing that this model has is something that we call the acquisition time. And that's the amount of time between the time that we give the weapon system a command to launch and the time that the missile actually launches. So it doesn't launch instantaneously when we tell it to launch. It takes a few seconds for the weapon system to lock on the target and then shoot the missile. So it's, of course, that's extremely simplistic, but we put something in there just to show you how that would work. Weapon system models don't have to launch munitions. In fact, you don't even have to use a munition if you don't want to. You could have, for example, a sensor model that just, whenever you detected something, you just went out and killed it. Or you could make a cognition model that would just go out and directly call the functions that would destroy another unit. Or a platform model that did that. But in the real world, as we've talked about before, in the real world, that's not how it happens. There has to be some type of device available to the human to be able to inflict damage on the other on another unit. The exception to that would be hand-to-hand combat, and then there would be two platforms directly interacting with each other. But if I had a handgun or a rifle, now I'm talking about a weapon system. In the case of a small arm like a handgun or a rifle that launches something that flies really, really fast, you could write a weapon system model that doesn't have a munition. So the human would give a command to the weapon system that says shoot or fire or whatever the command might be, and the weapon system would directly go out and make the right calls inside of Flames to inflict damage on the target unit. And we do that for some of the weapon systems in the starter models. The tank turret gun does not launch an individual round. We could have written it that way, but we don't. We just simulate the time it would take for that round to reach the target, and then we go out and from the weapon system directly try to damage the target unit without actually creating a munition. But most of the time, we do create a munition, and so the weapon system is just, its job is to create and launch that munition. And because that is a typical process in Flames, this very simple weapon system model is actually doing that. So if you look at the source code to this model, you'll see the standard way that you would launch a munition at another target. So let's talk about munition models. So right now, I've put this missile launcher on here, but I don't have any munition models. And since I don't have any, I wouldn't be able to actually launch anything. This unit would detect targets, and we'd give a command to the missile launcher. But because there are no munitions, it's as if I forgot to load munitions, or I'm out of munitions, and so I couldn't actually launch anything. So I'm going to go back to my unit and put some munitions on here. And I'm not going to use the employ statement, and that's because I have a slightly different command that I want to use there, and that's the add munition command. So instead of employ munition, it's add munition, and the primary difference between the employ and the add is that the add command allows me to specify, the add munition command allows me to specify quantity. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up a munition meta object. So I've got one of these in this scenario. We're going to go look at that in a minute. And then I can say quantity. And actually, I don't have to type it. It's actually one of the keywords that's in here. So I'll say quantity. And then I say equals, and I'm going to put 10 munitions on here. Oops, I'm not supposed to put equals. So I go back to my composition now, and you can see that I have the weapon system and I also have a munition. So let's go take a look at the munition. If you look at the Flames class hierarchy, which we've looked at before, you would see that munition is actually a subclass of platform. So all munitions are also platforms, which are subclasses of equipment. So they have the same set of parameters up here at the top that all platform models have. So if I go back and look at my light truck right here, you see that there's these same parameter values at the top. So because again, all munitions are platforms. Now this is a fairly simple munition. It has a max range, which actually we use in this scenario. It has a speed, and it just flies at a constant speed toward whatever target that we specify. And of course, you can always specify the unit of measure on those things. And then it has something called a lethality mode. You don't have to do this either in Flames in your models, but this is fairly standard thing. So even though this is a very simple munition model, we do show how you can model different kinds of lethality modes, and because it ends up using something called an effect model. So there's two different lethality modes. One of them is PK, and that's a probability of kill. And so when the munition reaches the target, a uniform random number is drawn between 0 and 1. And if the value is less than that number, then the target is killed. So here the PK value is 1.0, so we'll never do a uniform draw that's less than 1.0. So this particular munition, if we use this input parameter, it would always kill the target. It would kill it 100% of the time. Probability of kill would be 1.0. Another way to do it with more flexibility is an effect model. And in this case, when the munition reaches the target, instead of going out and trying to damage the target directly by doing a probability of kill calculation, it actually generates an effect. An effect model is a type of environment model, and that effect model can be whatever. And this is the place where if you want to do much more realistic weapons effects modeling, you can do that here and still deliver that effect with any kind of missile that you want. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. One of our customers called an offline, very, very detailed weapons effect model to actually do the damage calculation. And so we're using an extremely simple effect model, but again, the purpose of these models is to illustrate the different types of models that are supported by Flames and the way these models work together. So we have this very simple, we have an effect model here. So let's go look at that. Effects are underneath environment. If I go to environment, there's this thing called effects, and I select that menu to get to this window. We have just one class of effect in our tutorial models. It's called the PK effect. So that's the only class that we have loaded. And it has a it does more than just a PK. It has a lethal radius. So if the munition happens to land more than 20 meters away from the target, it's not going to kill it. And it has a way of having a linear PK. So if I hit it directly, the PK could be 1.0, and I could say that if I miss it, then and I miss it by 20 meters, the PK might only be 0.2. So that's the PK at the lethal radius. So the PK between 0 direct impact and the lethal radius would be computed linearly between those two values. And this little exclude munitions box, we have that also in a lot of our munition models. We might have a multi-warhead munition or multiple bombs that are being dropped on a target at the same time. And if you don't do something to filter out munitions, a blow up of a bomb might cause nearby bombs to blow up also. And then the bomb would never actually detonate and reach its target. So one of the ways to do that is put this little checkbox on there, and so the code of this model looks at that checkbox, and if a unit that is within the lethal radius is another munition, it'll just ignore it. So it'll allow that munition to continue on and do whatever it's going to do. So the way it works is when a weapon system is commanded to launch a munition, and that command, like in the real world, will come from a human. It'll come from a cognition model. The cognition model will command the weapon system to launch at a particular target. The weapon system will, if it meets all the engagement parameters, it will go out and engage the target. And it'll do that by launching a munition at the target. So this particular weapon system is designed to launch munitions that support a particular interface. So we've talked about interfaces before, and so I'm not going to belabor that. We're going to talk about it. We talk about it in a lot more detail in the developer training and entity interfaces. It's a very important thing. But this, so you're responsible for attaching the munitions to a unit separately, but you have to put munitions on it that support the proper interface. And you won't do that in this case. You won't get the wrong interface in this case because we only have one class of model. But when you're working with a lot of different models that are coming from different plugins, you'll need to make sure you put the right type of munition that's compatible with the weapon system that you're using. When the weapon system launches the munition, it actually creates a new unit dynamically, a brand new unit. And it takes this meta object that we've attached to our unit, right here, this particular munition. It clones that munition, and it takes that clone and it attaches it to the newly created unit, and that munition becomes the platform model for the unit. And then the weapon system sends additional commands to the munition that tells the munition what its target is and whatever else it needs to know to be able to fly out. And then the munition takes off. And then each successive time step, it becomes another unit in the scenario, and it's moving according to the parameters that have been specified. When it reaches the target, it then either does the PK calculation or it generates an effect. In this case, the way we have this one set up, it generates an effect, and then the effect then will actually perform the lethality calculations. And in this case, the effect ultimately just does a PK based on the parameters that are there, and the effect is the one that will determine whether or not the unit is killed or damaged. We can do partial damage in flames as well. The models that are in these tutorials and the starter models don't have partial damage individually for each type of model, but Flames has the ability to do that. Each equipment model has a damage method, and we could partially damage any particular model that we wanted to. So that's the flow of things. Just because I have these models on here, though, I've got a weapon system now. I've got a sensor. I've got the munitions. The sensor brought on its antenna and its data processor. Nothing's going to happen, though, unless I have a cognition model that's actually looking at the tracks that are coming from the data processor and that are going to be able to make decisions to engage and send the command to the weapon system. So we're going to add another cognition model now that because I know about these models and I'm familiar with them, I know how to compose a unit with the proper combination of models. I know that we have another cognition model that is used to perform this engagement processing. So I'm going to copy that statement and go to the end here and highlight that. And I'm going to pick the shooter model. And if everything's right, yep, the accept came without any configuration error. So now I've got 8 models on this guy. And these are the same 8 models that were on a unit when I created it through a unit pattern. So this unit now has the ability to detect things. It builds tracks. And it's this shooter model. And it doesn't have any input parameters either. But it's got several different methods here. These are all additional methods that are defined for the shooter. And some of those methods are internal. There's a lot of internal processing that goes on in engagement processing. But a couple of them are commands that can be initiated as a part of the definition of the unit. Assess and attack are 2 of those. Assign zone is another one. So if I go over to the unit now, and I go to my commands tab and I go after the start statement, I've got a few more commands now. I've got this assess, I've got attack, assign zone, and I've got attack. And those are commands that came from this FEX shooter cognition model. So I'm going to save. So I save the scenario, which also saves my unit data set. And I've got log turned on, and this is going to log everything that's happening with cognition models. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and we're going to take a look at the execution output. I need to do something else. Even though I have that cognition model on my unit, this shooter cognition model, I haven't given any commands. I haven't told the human that I want it to start looking for targets. So one of the ways I can do that is with the assess command. So I'm going to add that command. And it doesn't have any inputs, so it's ready to go. This command, as the description explains, and you can read that, it actually looks at the tracks from the data processor, and if it finds a track a target that is within in this case, within the range of the munition, it will launch a missile at the munition. So I am actually going to go ahead and put a target out here before I run it again. Otherwise, I won't see anything and I won't get to shoot. So I'm going to go out here and do new unit, and I'm going to put a red truck. And it needs a waypoint, so I'm just going to make it go over here this way. I'll have it be going away, and I'll say finish. Oops, I need to put a name on it. And I'll go ahead and save. So I don't know if I have everything set up right, but we're going to go ahead and run and see what happens. Oh, I made a mistake. I went to my shooter. I added a command, but remember, adding a command does not automatically do an accept. So that assess command did not get saved. So I have to do the accept. Most other things that I do with the mouse do automatically accept, but as I explained in a previous video, adding a command doesn't. And I could tell that I had something wrong because I looked at the execution output and I never saw the assess being executed here. So now I'm going to run. So now I see the assess. So there's more going on, and there's the munition going at that target. So let's pause. Let's take a look at the output in my execution output to get a little bit more insight in what happens. So we initiate a assess, which is right here, and some commands get executed instantly when they are initiated. So when I initiated that move to waypoint, you can see I don't see a message in here that says move to waypoint initiated. This command is set up as our most motion commands. It's set up to execute immediately. So when we initiate it, it gets executed immediately. And in cognition model development, you'll learn more about how to do that. So there's the message right there that said this thing was executed immediately. But a lot of cognition model commands take a certain amount of time in order to be able to complete. So movement commands require motion in order for them to complete. And they're not considered complete until the motion, the prescribed motion has been finished. Other commands just take time. So this assess command, we have it set up so that it requires a certain amount of time for the human to look at its air picture display or ground picture display, make a decision about whether or not there's a target out there, and make a decision to engage. And that's programmed into the behavior of the definition of that particular command. The cognition model developer got to specify that. So it's initiated, and then at some point later, you can see here it's a little bit more than 3 seconds later, the assess command actually gets executed. So a certain amount of time is required in order to be able to complete the execution of that command. So we have some logging that's taking place, and because I have the log output turned on, I've got internal messages inside assess that are being executed or that are being generated. And it tells me that it detected one target, and it's within the range of 5,000 meters. So why does it say 5,000 meters? Well, that's because this particular cognition model, the shooter cognition model, goes out to see if it has munitions, and it has to have munitions, otherwise it will complain. And I'll show you about that in a second. In fact, let me go show you that right now. Let me go to my script. I'm going to take this command, take this munition out, and I'm going to reset the scenario so I can make it second do accept. And I get this message. This comes from the configuration that is being performed by the cognition model. And it knows that in order for it to be able to shoot, it has to have a munition. And it requires a munition that supports the simple munition interface. So it goes out and looks. There is no munition there. So it says, you haven't composed this guy correctly. You don't have the right kind of munition model attached. And because this model can't shoot at all, it just disables the model completely. It says that the FVX shooter cognition model will not execute for this unit. We know we don't have the models that we need in order for it to execute properly, so we disable it. And that assess command is basically ignored. So I'm going to go ahead and accept the changes anyway. I'm going to get that same message, and I'm going to run. And you'll see here that there is no assess. Oh, in fact, because that particular model failed, the whole unit was not configured. So we couldn't even start it because this particular model didn't like how it was built, so we just turned the whole unit off. So we're going to go back here now to the composition in the script, and we're going to put the munition back on. By the way, I'd get a similar message if I took the sensor off, that the shooter guy needs a sensor, and you'd get this message that says, hey, he actually looks for the data processor, which is where he gets the tracks from. If there's no data processor out there, he says, nope, I can't run, and it would shut the whole unit down. So I'm going to go in here now, put that back on. And hit accept. So now he's all configured correctly. We're going to run it again. And we'll run it until that guy shoots. And then I'll pause it. And let's take a look now. We have assess being initiated. We get that move to waypoint command. And then we have, this is an internal command, and we'll talk about that. Actually, I don't think I'm going to talk about that. This is a cognition models can say that whenever the unit starts, I want you to initiate my startup command, and that happens internally. So if there are special things that I want to have happen inside the unit when the unit becomes active, we can do that there in that command and that method. But you'll learn more about that when you learn about cognition model development if you're a developer. So now the assess actually executes. And inside of that, it's going to the data processor. It's looking for targets within 500 meters. And so that's where I was when I did that little detour. If I go to my munition, the munition has a max range of 5 kilometers, which is 500 meters. So that's why we just printed that out just as a way of illustrating that we went to the munition and got its range. So because there was somebody, it was able to detect it, and it was inside the range of the munition, we engaged it. So when we engage it, we initiate the engage command, which is an internal command. The vast majority of the methods of cognition models that get executed are executed as a result of other methods being executed internally. You initiate a command, and that executes the method. Most things happen inside of a cognition model happening inside the cognition model. Some of the commands can be initiated outside from external sources, like building this scenario, but a lot of commands happen internally. So these engages are internal, and you can see here it's giving a command. Well, you don't see it here, but you see a message that says it's actually launching a munition at the red truck. So right after this message, if you look at the source code, you see that there's a command is given to the weapon system to actually launch the munition. When the munition reaches the target, it automatically initiates an internal command to allow the unit to evaluate the damage. And so it initiates the command. That command gets executed. When it's executed, the unit goes out and checks to see if the target was destroyed, and we cheat for that. We actually go out and get the true state of the target to do that. And then when that's all finished, we go out and start looking for another target. So while an engagement's taking place, we are not looking for targets. This particular unit is only able to engage one target at a time. That's the way that we designed this little simple model when we did it. So as soon as we're finished with this engagement, we'll go and look for another target. I believe that the evaluate damage method here, even if we missed it, assess would go out and it would ultimately shoot it again. So it always goes out and does an assess every time. We have other cognition models that are more sophisticated. If it misses, it will go straight to firing without having to go back through the whole assessment process. So that's how this weapon system works, how the munition works, and how it works with the cognition model. This is a very standard flow of processing in Flames, although the models themselves are usually much more sophisticated than the models that we have here. But we have, as I've mentioned, the primary models that get involved in engagements, we have them here now: sensors and weapon systems and data processors and munitions. So you can learn how that's done in Flames on a very simple model. And hopefully it'll make it easier for you to understand the starter models when you start trying to work with those, and when you actually start trying to write your own models. So that's all that I want to say about weapon systems and munition models at this point. I'm going to do one thing here. I'm going to take this unit. So I'm going to reset, and I'm going to right click on this guy and say edit. And I have to be on the commands tab in order to see the graphics. And I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to move him a long ways away. By the way, there's a tool in Flames that is a range bearing tool. So all you have to do is take your mouse in the 2D view, hold down the control key, so I'm pressing that now, and then click and drag. So when you do that, you get to see the range and bearing to your new mouse position. So this is 8 nautical miles away, and there's a setting that you can use in the 2D view preference setting to change the unit measure. So 6 miles is about 10 kilometers. So I'm outside the range of the munition. So technically I should not fire a missile at this target. So I'm going to let up on my mouse and I'm going to run this over again. And you can see that each time assess is run, it says there's no targets detected. So it doesn't shoot. So I'm going to put this guy back. And I'll put him back closer. And my sensor model had no terrain masking. I can tell because there's this lighter area right here that I'm probably behind a mountain. In fact, I'm going to show you another tool. We're going to go here to Tools and Side View Profile. And I'm going to say by unit, and I'm going to pick this unit. And then I'm going to go over here by unit. Well, actually, I'm going to do this just by location. And I am going to pick this right here, and this will show me the terrain in between these two locations. So if I happen to be right through this valley, I might be able to see it, but you can see there's a little bit of a peak right there that probably masks it. So that line will turn blue if I have if I have line of sight. I'm going to set this back to location. I'm going to leave it there, and this will allow me to set my antenna height. If you go look at my sensor, I have an antenna height, so you can see I'm a little bit higher now of 2 meters. So the antenna is not right on the ground, but it's up off the ground, attached on the top of the vehicle somewhere. And I'm going to now take this guy and drag, and so I should be able to get some blue. Yeah, so right in this area right here, I've got some places where I can see. But if I'm over here, terrain-wise, I clearly can't see. I've got some intervening terrain. So I'm going to close this tool. I'm going to go to my sensor model. And in order to be able to make a change to this sensor model, I'm going to have to make my own copy of it. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a new data set and then hit accept. So now I've got my own copy of this sensor, my own data set. I'm going to turn on terrain masking. I'm going to run my scenario again, and it's going to say no targets detected. So if I reset my scenario and I turn off terrain masking, hit accept and run, now it's going to detect a target and it's going to shoot at it. So that's just an illustration of sensors and weapon systems and munitions and how we use the range and the terrain to determine whether we can actually shoot that target. Again, all of this is specific to the implementation of these particular classes. You can get the source code and make these models behave in a different way if you choose. So I will stop now. Thank you for watching, and thank you for using Flames.